Hey everyone, Harry here to talk about the sentence that Donald Trump would likely receive were he convicted on the charges in the indictment unsealed Friday and brought by Special Counsel Jack Smith in the Department of Justice. Okay, we're going to have to go through a little bit of sentencing guidelines law in the federal system. Hang in there. It won't be too arcane or mathematical, and it'll be worth it. First, when people are charged in federal crimes, you'll often see reported the charge provides for up to a 20-year sentence or up to a 40-year sentence, and pretty outlandish numbers. And then, at least if it's a press release from the Department of Justice, they will add the necessary proviso. The actual sentence will be determined by the application of the sentencing guidelines. What are the sentencing guidelines? They were a revolution in criminal sentencing in the mid-'80s, actually orchestrated by Justice Stephen Breyer before he was a justice, when he was a counsel in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And there were shocking numbers about how different people got dramatically different sentences based on what judge they happened to draw. And also among individual judges with white-collar crimes versus street crimes and the like. So this was an attempt to make sentencing much more routinized and consistent and fair. So the sentencing guidelines, the real sort of core, the sentencing guideline are this thick manual that you carry around if you're a prosecutor, and the back page, the back inside cover, you look at again and again and again. It's a grid, the sort of magic grid that is the real locus of the guidelines computation. We'll put it up here so you can see it. But as you see, it's got an x-axis and a y-axis. The x-axis is the offense level from 1 to 43. And the y-axis is criminal history. It goes up pretty severely on the notion that you really got to tamp down hard on recidivists, and the longer sentences, eventually you have to completely impose draconian times in jail. All right, so that's where you look to find how long a sentence is. It used to be that was final, except in rare and prescribed instances, when for specified reasons, a district court judge applying the guidelines could go up or down, so-called upward or downward departure. The Supreme Court ruled, the sort of revolution to the revolution in the last 10 or 15 years, that you can't, the guidelines cannot be imposed mandatorily. It's a violation of defendants' rights to sort of individualized sentencing. And so they are considered merely precatory, merely recommendations, and a district court has discretion to depart, but still has to provide reasons and for downward or upward departure, and that those are subject to review by a court of appeals as to whether a district court abused its discretion. All right. So that's the backdrop. That sets the table. Now, the guideline grid itself. Let's put this up for just one more second and scan down from 1 to about 30, because that's where we are going. For Trump's charges, now, of course, there are several, and there's a whole different question about if he were convicted, whether they'd be served concurrently or at the same time, that is, or consecutively, one after the other. It doesn't really matter. As you'll see, the guideline sentence that will be imposed if he's convicted here of the leading charge, so 31 leading charges under the Espionage Act. They don't, by the way, make for 31 sentences. They would wind up in basically the same place. But the charge, the leading charge, would impose a sentence way more than his natural life expectancy. In other words, he would certainly die in prison under a guideline sentence. How does that work? Okay. So you start under the Espionage Act, you begin with a base level of 25. Do you see that on the grid? And from there, you have to add 4. We're just calculating base offense level, arriving at 29 if the material was top secret, if the classified material that you unlawfully retained was top secret, which it is in Trump's case. So before, with no controversy whatsoever, we're up at 29. Then there are 2 or 3 other adjustments that you could add to increase the offense level. Remember, he's charged in a conspiracy, and he played a leadership role. Even without the conspiracy, he plays a leadership role in directing Nauta, Evan Corcoran, others. That's an extra 4 points to the offense level under the guidelines, and now that could put him at 33. There's obstruction on the Espionage Act, not simply the separate obstruction charge, but he obstructs when he's not only does he not return when given, but he throws sand in the gears. He lies about things, moves around boxes. Seems pretty clearly obstruction. That's another 2, and then potential other 2 for abuse of trust based on position. And you can't get higher than the president of the United States and a more kind of flagrant abuse. So add those together, you're looking at 37. In other words, one little sorry for the quiver here on my computer, but that is 210 to 262, right? We're talking about in excess. Even the low end is almost 20 years, as I say, many well beyond his life expectancy. It means he would clearly die in prison. All right, so that would be what the guidelines themselves provide. Now, as I mentioned, they are precatory, and a district court could depart, but you've got to give reasons, and this is a really tricky situation. Taking a step back, we've talked for years really about if Trump were indicted or charged, would there be an avenue for an overall sort of Solomonic, what's in the best interest of the public kind of sentence, the way in our only real precedent here, the Nixon case, Ford, the president of the United States, stepped in and said, for the good of the public, I'm going to pardon him, and he's in exile. Our long national nightmare is over. We needn't put him away. Now, you could imagine a similar sort of figure in calculus saying, if they were just a philosopher king or in charge of the country, saying, if he's convicted, if he goes away, we don't need the extra revenge factor of a long jail sentence or even a jail sentence. Maybe it's okay for home confinement. And in fact, putting him in jail, the vividness of the orange jumpsuit and the revealing, in fact, that he's bald, and the incredible deprivation and privations for, some people would rejoice at that, but others would be, completely incensed and inflamed. Maybe the best thing for the country. I'm stating no opinion on this, but I'm just saying that it's plausible you could have that view, but it's not clear how that view factors in, given the way we've approached this case. So, Biden and Garland could have imposed that kind of approach with playing the joints. Once Garland appointed Jack Smith, would put the whole case on this straightforward legal regime, treating him as any other person. There would have been one last opportunity when they came in for their meeting for the Department of Justice to have fashioned a non-custodial sentence. They could have said, okay, here's all the charges we're going to convict you of. Plead now, maybe agree never to run for office again. and will recommend, and we think the court will impose, a non-custodial sentence. You won't have to be in jail, and that'll be, you know, a global resolution, including maybe the January 6th stuff, which is still out there. But there was no overture of any kind or willingness for him to plead. So now he's in a system that doesn't have that kind of flexibility anymore. The Department of Justice, on the model of treating him like any other defendant, you know, they're looking at 20 plus years under the guidelines. How can they recommend 0? And a district court judge could say, but for this, essentially try to do the same imposition of a factor that just doesn't exist in sentencing guidelines. What's in the best interest of the country, and give him a sentence of next to nothing. But and maybe a court of appeals would uphold it, but it's just not really in the legal regime that he's now in. There's the possibility of clemency if he's, you know, that Biden could impose to try to play the forward role. But basically, it seems to me now, as with many other things, maybe Eileen Cannon is a wild card here, but it seems to me that, you know, we're looking at a situation where he's gonna, you know, the law points to 20 years in prison, and he's got to see some prison. It would be likely for him to see prison time, because no individual actor can sort of speak for the whole system, and doing her or his job under the law makes it very difficult to cut this kind of huge slack to keep a former president out of jail. So that's the situation and the stakes we're talking about. Just a quick word on Walt Nauta, his co-conspirator. He was certainly offered a sweet deal. My best guess is, you know, plead guilty to the lie you told the FBI, which we have you dead to rights on, when you said, oh, no sensitive documents here, and cooperate and tell us about what Trump told you, and you won't have to be in jail. And he's the guy who's going down with the ship. It really is like a organized crime analogy, where, you know, he's the loyal foot soldier who's going to stay true to the boss, even if it means going to jail. There was a saying in the mafia that you used to hear about. I can do a nickel standing on my head. That meant I'll go to jail for 5 years. That's okay. What actually broke the back of the mafias was when the United States passed RICO laws and very long drug laws, and the mafia was into drugs, and that's what actually broke them, because they would do short sentences. That seems to be the mindset of Walt Nauta. So he would be looking at basically somewhere in the 2 to 4 year range for his role in a conspiracy to obstruct justice, which is what he's been charged with. All right, there you have it. Trump looking at, without some outlandish and extra legal exception granted because he's former president, or it would inflame the country. He's looking at a sentence that would put him in jail for life, and now to looking for a few years as well. It's a long time away, by the way, a year or more, and especially with Eileen Cannon. But that's what seems to be at the end of the road. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.